Good evening. This is the electronic commerce course, and this is the introductory lecture. Here are the learning objectives for Chapter 1 in the text, and we'll be reviewing them during this lecture. The first is to understand the nature of e-commerce and how it's progressed through three waves of development. Understand why companies concentrate on revenue models and the analysis of business processes rather than business models when they undertake e-commerce activities. Also, discover the characteristics of good opportunities for e-commerce and what are the barriers for e-commerce. We'll also take a look at the economic forces that are affecting e-commerce and learn about the use of value chains and SWOT analysis. And we'll finish up with the implications of the international nature of electronic commerce. So, our introduction to e-commerce, we'll start with the background. Electronic commerce began in the United States. Today, China's the leader in online retail sales, and they have been since 2013. More and more sales are being made on smartphones. China is the world's largest potential online market. Active internet users are one reason, and also its upward economic growth. Buyers use both domestic sites in China and United States sites, and they're influenced by online reviews and discussions. It's led to online review sites and seller participation in Chinese chat and messaging sites. Sellers in China must account for regional differences within this diverse country. Distribution and delivery is difficult without well-developed roads and standardized shipping practices. As a result, some sellers have created their own distribution systems. Chapter 1 in the text addresses how online businesses have emerged and grown to accommodate various cultures and infrastructure challenges around the world. The evolution of electronic commerce started really with a rapid growth from the mid-1990s to 2000. There was a dot-com boom during that period, followed by a dot-com bust in 2000. From 2000 to 2003, there were overly gloomy news reports about the decline of the dot-com revolution. From 2003 on, there was many signs of profound rebirth in the dot-com electronic commerce. Sales and profit growth returned, and electronic commerce grew faster than overall economies and became a large part of the total economy. In 2008, there was a general recession, but electronic commerce suffered far less than most of the economy. From 2003 to the present, electronic commerce has expanded more in good times and contracted less in bad times than other economic sectors. Electronic commerce includes shopping on the web, businesses trading with other businesses, internal company processes being put on the web. There's a broader term that's also applied to this sector, and that's electronic business or e-business. This includes all business activities using internet technologies, the internet and the World Wide Web, and also wireless transmissions on mobile telephone networks. .com or pure.com is businesses operating only online. Some of the categories of electronic commerce are business to consumer, and that's consumer shopping on the web, business to business, which is also known as e-procurement, and that's transactions conducted between web businesses, supply management, which is also procurement, and they negotiate purchase transactions over the web with suppliers. Another category of electronic commerce is business processes, the use of internet technologies within the business. So, business activity is a task performed by a worker doing his or her job. It may or may not be related to a transaction. A transaction is an exchange of value, a purchase, a sale, conversion of raw materials into a finished product, and it involves at least one business activity. Business processes are groups of logical, related, sequential activities and transactions. And the web helps people work more effectively. There's a rough approximation shown in this figure, and we see the relative size of electronic commerce elements. The dollar volume and number of transactions in business to business is much greater than that in business to consumer. As to the number of transactions, supporting business processes is much greater than business to consumer and business to business combined. So the business processes that the company uses to support selling and purchasing activity is far larger and encompasses both of the other categories. Consumer to consumer is individuals buying and selling amongst themselves, for example, at a web auction site. Consumer to consumer sales are included in the business to consumer category. The seller acts as a business for transaction purposes. Business to government is business transactions with government agencies, for example, paying taxes or filing required reports. Business to government transactions are included in business to business discussions. And here we can see a chart where there's a description of all the various categories of e-commerce, as well as examples for each one of those categories. Early e-commerce started with electronic fund transfers, and that could be wire transfers, electronic transmissions of account exchange information over private communication networks. Western Union is a good example of that. Electronic data interchange, or EDI, and that's business-to-business transmission of computer-readable data in a standard format. Standard transmitting formats have the benefits of reducing errors, it avoids printing and mailing costs, and eliminates the need to re-enter data. Trading partners. Businesses engaging in EDI with each other are trading partners. EDI pioneers, for example Walmart, improved purchasing processes and supplier relationships. Pioneers faced high implementation costs. A value-added network is where independent firms offering an EDI connection and transaction forwarding services. So a value-added network is an independent firm offering EDI connections and transaction forwarding services. EDI continues to be a large portion of business-to-business electronic commerce. The first wave of electronic commerce was from 1995 to 2003. Between 1997 and 2000, more than 12,000 internet businesses were started. Between 2000 to 2003, more than 5,000 startups went out of business. Again, there was extensive coverage of the dot-com bust. $200 billion was spent on bailing out and starting businesses, and this set the stage for significant future growth. The second wave of electronic commerce was between 2004 and 2009. There was an expanding international scope then. Established companies used their own funds to finance a gradual expansion. Faster, less expensive internet technologies became available. This included an increase in broadband connections, and that's a key element of business-to-consumer components, transactions in this wave. Email became an integral part of marketing and customer contact. And there's a renewed interest in internet advertising. Also during the second wave, the promise of available technologies was fulfilled. There was a legal distribution of music, video, and other digital products. There was also the Web 2.0 technologies. This is the social web. Users participate in creating and modifying content on third-party websites. There was a shift in online business strategy in the second wave, away from the first mover advantage, which is expensive and not always successful, to a smart follower strategy. In other words, the second mouse is the one who gets the cheese. The third wave of electronic commerce was from 2010 to the present. The factors in the third wave included a critical mass of mobile users with powerful devices came online. This increased because of the availability of smartphones and tablets. Mobile applications were used for over 40% of online sales. Also a factor was the increase in electronic commerce activity. Growing numbers of people using handheld devices to access the internet were making electronic commerce transactions. Another factor was the widespread participation in social networking. Businesses can use social commerce to advertise, promote, or suggest specific products and services. Some more factors in the third wave were increased online participation by smaller businesses in sales, purchasing, and capital raising activities. One example is crowdsourcing. Sophisticated analysis of data companies were collecting information and data about online customers. And this was the inception of big data and the application of data analytics to electronic commerce. Finally, there was an increased integration of tracking technologies to business electronic commerce and the management of business processes within companies. There were RFID devices and biometric technologies. And here we see a chart that has columns for the first wave, second wave, and third wave, and some of the characteristics that happened in each one of those phases. So, some of the e-commerce models. Well, the business model is a set of processes that are combined to achieve the company goal. In the first wave of electronic commerce, investors sought internet-driven business models. There are expectations of rapid sales growth and market dominance. Successful .com business models were emulated. This led to many business failures. Michael Porter argued that business models for the internet did not exist. Instead of copying a model, companies should examine their business elements, streamline, enhance, or replace with internet technology-driven processes. In other words, make your processes more efficient using internet technology. So that was the lesson learned in business models. A revenue model is a specific collection of business processes used to identify, market, and make sales to customers. It classifies revenue-generating activities for communication and analysis purposes. Business processes and e-commerce. Some examples of business processes are purchasing raw materials or goods for resale, converting materials and labor into finished goods, managing transportation and logistics, hiring and training employees, managing business finances. It's also important to identify processes that benefit from e-commerce technologies. Not all processes can be improved with technologies. Firms can use it to help them adapt to change, however. One of the important aspects of an e-commerce model is the role of merchandising. It's a combination of store layout, store design, and product display knowledge. Salespeople have skills to identify customer needs and meet them. Merchandising and personal selling skills can be difficult to practice remotely. Companies must be able to transfer these skills to have website success. Some products are easier to sell on the internet than others. So, what are the products that are suitable or good candidates for electronic commerce? Well, they're products where customers do not need to experience the physical characteristics before purchase. Technology has made more processes suitable for electronic commerce. Commodity items are standardized, well-known products that are only differentiated by price. So you have to have an attractive shipping profile to sell these standardized, well-known products online. This includes items such as books, clothing, shoes, kitchen accessories, and other small household items. The easier to sell products have a strong brand reputation and appeal to small but geographically diverse groups. Traditional commerce is better for products relying on personal selling skills and for transactions involving large amounts of money. The combination of electronic and traditional commerce strategies are best when the business process includes both commodity and personal inspection aspects. And here we see a chart that gives us columns that are well suited to electronic commerce, and then on the right, well suited to traditional commerce, and then in the middle, suited to the combination of both. So, some of the opportunities for electronic commerce. Electronic commerce can help increase profits and sales, and also decrease business costs. You can create a virtual community with electronic technologies, and that's a gathering of people sharing a common interest. E-commerce purchasing opportunities include identifying new suppliers and business partners, efficiently obtaining competitive bid information, increasing the speed and information exchange accuracy, and a wider range of choices available 24 hours a day. The benefits to general society include lower costs to issue and secure products. You have electronic payments of tax refunds, electronic payments of public retirement, and electronic payments of welfare support. This provides faster transmission, provides fraud, theft, and loss protection. Electronic payments are easier to audit and monitor. Telecommuting reduces traffic and pollution. That's another benefit to general society. And products and services are available in remote areas. Some of the poor choices for electronic commerce are perishable foods and high-cost unique items. There's 4 barriers to electronic commerce. One is the need for a critical mass of customers with the appropriate technology. There's an unpredictability in costs and revenues. That's the second barrier. The third barrier is insufficient tools for hardware and software integration. And the fourth barrier are cultural and legal barriers. Let's consider the economics of electronic commerce. Economics is the study of how people allocate scarce resources. Markets are where potential sellers come into contact with buyers. It requires a medium of exchange to be available. There's a couple of organizations. You have a hierarchical business organization, and these are firms or companies. And then when dealing with firms or companies, one of the considerations is transaction cost. And that's the motivation for moving economic activity into these hierarchically structured firms. A transaction cost is the total cost a buyer and seller incur while gathering information and negotiating purchase and sales of a transaction. Costs include things like brokerage fees and sales commissions, and the cost of information search and information acquisition. Ronald Coase was one of the originators of transaction cost economics, and he analyzed high transaction costs, and he concluded that hierarchical organizations replace market negotiated transactions when there are high transaction costs. A supervisor and worker monitoring elements can be part of those transaction cost offsets. Oliver Williamson extended Ronald Coase's analysis, and he looked at complex manufacturing and assembly operations that were hierarchically organized and vertically integrated. Manufacturing innovations increased monitoring activities' effectiveness and efficiency. The strategic business unit is the part of the company large enough to manage itself, or a part of the company that's large enough to manage itself. But it's also small enough to quickly respond to business environment changes. Electronic commerce can improve the flow of information, increase coordination of actions, and change the attractiveness of vertical integration. One example is employment transactions. Telecommuting reduces or eliminates many transaction costs in that activity. Network economic structures. This is neither a market nor a hierarchy. You have strategic alliances or partnerships between groups. They coordinate strategies, resources, and skill sets by forming long-term relationships based on shared purposes. Strategic partners come together for specific projects. Network organizations are well suited to information-intensive technology industries. Electronic commerce makes networks easier to construct and maintain. And as the book noted, a prominent economist, Castells, predicts that economic networks will become the organizing structure for social interactions. So we have markets which have transaction costs that have to be borne by the participants. We have internal hierarchies that, because of their efficiencies, can minimize those transaction costs. And then we have network economic structures that are a hybrid between the two. there's a law of diminishing returns that comes into play, and this law states that activities yield less value as the consumption amount increases. There's also a network effect, and this is an exception to the law of diminishing returns. As more people or organizations participate in a network, the value to each participant increases. And so examples of that are landline phones were an early example of that in the 20th century, email in the late 20th century, and of course e-commerce today. So here we see a hierarchical form of economic organization. Control information goes from the top managers down to the middle managers to the first line supervisors and to the knitters. And this is for making sweaters. The sweaters are then sold to clothing retail shops who are the buyers of it. But control information goes down from the top, and monitoring information goes from the bottom to the top. So you can see that there's some rigidity in this form of economic organization. In a market form of organization, there's a lot more flexibility. You have the knitters who are independent. They put their products into a knitter's market. The sweater dealers then buy the sweaters from the knitter's market, but of course there's transaction costs for doing that. And then they in turn create a sweater market, and then the retail clothing shops buy from the sweater market. So this market form of economic organization is more flexible, but you incur transaction costs. And because of that, it may be less efficient. Finally, there's the network form of economic organization. And that's where you've got your sweater dealer, who is, again, you have top managers, and then you have sweater traders. And the sweater traders sell to the retail clothing shops, and they buy from the custom knitters. Information that goes into both the sweater traders and the top managers comes from marketing research firms. And information goes into the market research firms from the retail clothing shops. And the market research firm also sends information into the custom knitters. So this is an attempt to diminish some of the transaction costs, especially with the leverage of market research information, and yet retain some of the flexibility of the market form of operation. Electronic commerce opportunities. Identifying electronic commerce opportunities. First, it's important to focus on specific business processes. Break your business down into these sets of business processes. Then each one of those can be considered a series of value-adding activities that combine together to meet the firm's goals. Business activities are conducted by firms of all sizes. A firm can be multiple business units owned by a common set of shareholders. An industry is multiple firms selling similar products to similar customers. Strategic business unit value chains. A value chain is organizing strategic business unit activities to design, produce, promote, market, deliver, and support the products and services. Michael Porter includes supporting activities such as human resource management and purchasing. Strategic business unit primary activities are design, identifying customers, purchasing materials and supplies, manufacturing products or creating a service, marketing and selling, delivering, and providing after-sale service and support. The importance of primary activities depends on the product or service and the customers. Some of the central corporate organization support activities include finance and administration, human resource management, and technology development. Industry value chains. So, we need to examine where a strategic business unit fits into its industry. Michael Porter, a key business strategist, has come up with a value system. Describes a larger activities stream into which a particular business unit's value chain is embedded. The industry value chain refers to value systems. Awareness of business value chain activities allows the identification of new opportunities, and it's a useful way to think about your general business strategy. A SWOT analysis is good for evaluating business unit opportunities. SWOT stands for Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats Analysis. You first look into your business unit and identify the strengths and weaknesses. Then you review its operating environment and identify opportunities and threats. And then you take advantage of the opportunities by avoiding the threats, building on your strengths, and compensating for your weaknesses. So, strengths, some of the questions you would ask is, what does the company do well? Is the company strong in its market? Does the company have a strong sense of purpose? And does the company have a culture to support that purpose? Questions you might ask for opportunities are, what are the industry trends? Are they moving upward? Do markets exist for the company's products or services? Are there new technologies that the company can exploit? Weaknesses, what does the company do poorly? What problems can be avoided? Does the company have serious financial liabilities? Threats are, what are the competitors doing well? What obstacles does the company face? Are there troubling challenges or changes in the company's business environment, technologies, laws, and regulations? So, we go back to the value chain. That's going to be an important piece of evidence for your SWOT analysis. The industry value chains that your company feeds into are going to help you decide or provide input into the decision-making process in your SWOT analysis. And that in turn will lead you to develop strategies to exploit opportunities and to compensate for weaknesses. So here we see a value chain for a strategic business unit. And the supporting activities performed by the central corporate organization are financial and administrative activities, human resources activities, technology development activities, and then primary activities performed in a strategic business unit that are supported by the central corporate organization. But these activities in the strategic business unit include identifying customers, designing products or services to satisfy those customers, manufacturing a product or creating a service, and that usually entails the purchase of materials and supplies, delivery, and that is the feed of manufacturing output, marketing and selling efforts into the delivery mechanism, and then after the product's delivered, providing after sales, service, and support. So here's a value chain that we need to look at and get evidence for how the industry, how we are doing in the industry, and then we can feed this into our SWOT analysis. So here's an industry value chain for a strategic business unit. As an example, a logger cuts down a tree, sawmill converts logs into lumber, the lumber yard, in other words the distributor, provides a selection of lumber for a variety of customers. One of its customers might be a chair factory that assembles the chair. Then you have a furniture retailer that buys the chairs and then markets them. Then you have a consumer that purchases and uses the chair. And then you have a landfill or recycler that disposes of the chair after its useful life. So this is an industry value chain where you've got a series of organizations cooperating in the general market to provide value to each other in a chain of value, and of course many chains of value. This is just one path from the logger to the consumer of a chair. And as I mentioned, we'll finish up with the international nature of electronic commerce. The internet connects computers worldwide. When companies use the web to improve business processes, they automatically operate in a global environment. There's a third wave. It's a rapidly increasing proportion outside of the United States. China, India, and Brazil have seen enormous growth recently. Key issues in international commerce include trust, culture, language, government, and infrastructure. Some of the trust issues on the web. It's important for all businesses to establish trusting relationships with their customers. Companies can rely on established brand names as one way to establish trust. It's challenging for new companies because they're anonymous when trying to establish a web presence. So they have to plan somehow to establish credibility, and that's essential. Sellers cannot assume site visitors will know that they are trustworthy. Businesses must overcome distrust in web strangers. Businesses must also adapt to local cultures. Think globally, act locally. They have to provide local language versions of websites, as customers are more likely to buy from sites in their own language. Websites available in English only have declined dramatically to about 25% of local sites. Languages may require multiple translations for separate dialects. Localization means a translation considers multiple elements of the local environment. Cultural issues. An important element of business trust is anticipating how the other party to a transaction will act in specific circumstances. Culture is the combination of language and customs, and it's going to vary across national boundaries and even within regions of a nation. Care must be taken in choosing packaging, product names, icons used to represent common actions, and even colors. Japanese shoppers resisted U.S. sites for years because of their resistance to the use of credit cards. A culture and government. Some areas have cultural environments that are inhospitable to online discussions and transactions that occur on the internet. This cultural environment may lead to government controls that limit electronic commerce development. Many companies filter available web content, and some have even denounced the internet. Countries such as the People's Republic of China and Singapore traditionally control access to information, but they want to reap the benefits of electronic commerce. The result has been many regulations and requirements. Infrastructure issues. Computers and softwares connected to the internet and their related communication networks all fall under infrastructure issues. Outside of the United States, the telecommunication industry is either government-owned or government-regulated. This inhibits development or limits expansion. High local telephone connection costs affect online behaviors. Over half of all websites turn away international orders because of no process to handle them. And this problem is increasing globally. A freight forwarder arranges international transactions, shipping, and insurance, but not everybody has that process worked out. A customs broker arranges tariff payments and compliance with international shipping laws. Again, not all companies on the internet have that process worked out. A bonded warehouse must be used as a secure location that holds international shipment until customs requirements and payments are satisfied. Again, that's a complex process that not all internet businesses have a process to handle. Finally, handling international transaction paperwork has an annual cost of $700 billion. Of course, software automates some of that paperwork, but you can see the challenge. And here we see the proportion of online business to consumer sales by geographic region. China is the largest at 40%, followed by the United States at 31, Europe at 20, and the rest of the world at 9%. And here we can see all of the elements and the business processes that would be needed to fulfill an international transaction from your website. And it is a daunting activity right now. Okay, so that's the end of Lecture 1. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you on the forums. Good evening.